As you enter the lobby of Museum of Innocence, you see a whole wall of cigarettes. But there I wanted to introduce the madness of my character, who collects the cigarette butts of his frustrated beloved. Kemal, the obsessive, after he picks up each cigarette, puts them in some bag or plastic bag and an envelope, then writes a note about that day, such as she gets angry, she crushes her cigarettes even more. Füsun, she writes. She is paying attention to his beloved as a novelist pays attention to objects and the world around him. And each visit, Kemal, hopeful Kemal, who wants to gain her heart back, is writing about her emotions. This is a sort of a survey, catalog of the emotions of the female heroine, seen through the eyes of the male hero. Museum of Innocence is both a novel that I wrote and published in 2008 and a museum that I opened in 2012. I invented a story. A man falls in love with a woman so much and his love ends up to be unhappy, tragic. So in order to satisfy his longing for her, he begins to collect everything she touches, everything they look at together in their happier times, everything they care about, movies they go to, daily life objects of Istanbul, and they have a romantic relationship walking in the streets and parks of Istanbul, and everything that relate to that kind of Istanbul of 1970s, 80s. And these objects that my character collected, because they had looked at these objects with his beloved, Füsun, are also happen to be the objects of my life, because with my character and I have the same age, the same upper middle class secular culture of Istanbul. It's not that I had a collection, then I thought about a home for my collection. I collected and wrote and collected. In my childhood, I collected little pictures that you take of chocolates and chewing gums. These are the Turkish movie stars, Turkish footballers, Turkish sportsmen. If you do all 100 portraits of them, you go to the company and they'll give you another present, so forth and so on. And we used to play. We used to also gamble with them because they had numbers, and we used them also as sort of playing cards. So this is, for example, a very personal, nostalgic vitrine, which alludes to my character and also my life in Turkey, in Istanbul, in 1950s and 60s. I like to tell stories through object, that when I invent in my mind's eye, I see a scene, two main characters, and then I also try to picture some objects related to them. Objects also have the power to trigger our memories. For example, we go to a movie, we have its ticket, then we put that ticket in our pocket, then we forget it there. Some 20 years pass, suddenly we find the same jacket, find the ticket, or we say to ourselves, oh, I saw this movie some 20 years ago. If I hadn't had this ticket, I would not have remembered the film. So I argue objects have the power to generate the time lost or lost memories. In Museum of Innocence, remembering is voluntary. This is a collection of objects that a person wanted to keep so that he would remember beautiful, good days. It's not accidental that these objects are put together. My characters in Museum of Innocence, and also perhaps in my other novels, enjoy present, seeing it as seen from future, looking it from past. So in my novels, I have, and William Faulkner also did this, have the possibility to give three dimensions, three different times in one sentences. Museums gives us a good opportunity to look at an object now and also the back, the past of that object intertwines past and present. In that sense, yes, museums are places where time is converted into space. Museum of Innocence is successful in the way that it has many visitors. This was beyond my expectations. But something else happened in the last 14 years in which the museum is open, that it turned out to be a sort of a cult place for lovers. The visitors are using this for something else, leaving mysterious love letters to each other. And then I left a message for you in one of these and find it, or something like that. We're not touching them, but after a while they're filled, so we are taking them out and preserving and dating them. At the end of Ottoman Empire, Turks were both run by religious doctrine and Arabic language, and of course, Oriental time, which is 6 hours ahead or earlier than it's noon time, it is 6, so, and Turkish business was flourishing, so French and Swiss clockmakers were producing unique watches with two faces, one showing the time in Paris and with Roman alphabet, Roman numbers, and the other face of the watch showing the Arabic time, prayer time. So you buy a watch, you are both showing the time and the conditions in East and West. And I think my fiction and myself I am like an East-West watch, which is confused about two worlds. And I like this box, not only because of that and many, many reasons as well. Once I wrote the novel and I had the objects, I had this, how do I tell the story through object? Well, of course, I should follow the novel. The museum follows the chapters of the novel. Not only that, our units, our vitrines, our boxes has the chapter heading of the novel. At one point in the story, the female character disappears and the male Kemal, the protagonist, is sad. He can only reach the house she had left with her family, and there are the arm of a doll, something from bathroom. The guest number, every single house in Istanbul in 50s and 60s and 70s had this number. Marbles that I played in my childhood. Things that, for me, very personal, that I attribute to the story in the empty house. Then I did a composition, surrealistic, inspired by 1920s space experimentation. This museum, not the novel, is also inspired by, of course, and a tribute to surrealism as well. Once I had this building, now my problem was to place these objects according to some logic where visitors who had not read the novel would have a sense of the quality of the surface of the objects, the texture of life of Istanbul between 1970s and early 2000s, and also visual atmosphere of the Istanbul, my city, was very important to capture, to contain, and to give back. Don't forget that I wanted to be a painter and fail, and realized that at the age of mid-40s that I want to do an artwork combined with literature, and this is my first attempt at a combination. It's both, when you're here, it's both literature and visual arts. In 2011, I did not write novels for 6 months, but was busy composing one by one these vitrines, boxes, units, glass vitrines, wooden vitrines, in the manner of perhaps Joseph Cornell, Rauschenberg, Juan Gris. This museum is based on the things that this generation of surrealistic artists developed with ready-mades. At that time, ready-made was an important concept, And in Museum of Innocence, we have different categories of ready-mades. Semi-ready-mades, fake ready-mades, combination of ready-made with an invented things, thus addressing our imagination to the petty, unimportant, cheap daily life objects. Museums should not be a safe or heaven for precious things only. The museum should honor and put on a pedestal the daily life of the objects. Museums should not only dramatize the history of a nation or a group or a gender or a Chinese army or a European woman, but should also go and explore the dramas of individual beings. Museum of Innocence is not representing a group, but is dramatizing the story of certain individuals in Istanbul. Since we are going to exhibit the daily life objects of average citizens, the future of the museums, I argue, is inside our homes, not in palaces or vaults or hidden safes of the king's palace, but in our daily lives, in our bus tickets or salt shakers. We are in a certain neighborhood of Istanbul. Outside is more similar streets. But here we took the images and objects of these streets, especially 1970s, 80s, and combined them with other things and produce a unique atmosphere. I strongly believe that people who had not read the novel, doesn't know much about my work, but enjoy being here, come for that atmosphere. Museums in the last 30 years end up being not only storage places, but also places where humanity now discuss its future, its theories, its philosophy, and museums went up. But I also care about museums as places of atmosphere where there is some unique sensibility, where you can think differently, enjoy life differently, look at your life from a different angle. Perhaps this is a unique place where space and time are organized in such a way that you're confused. Museum of Innocence also illustrates the texture of daily life in Istanbul between 1974 to end of 20th century. And in order to stress the urban landscapes, Istanbul urbanscapes of the years, I went into old films of Istanbul, especially black and white films, and picked up details, sequences in which we see the town, not the famous film stars, but I care about the old visions of Istanbul in old films because I was living as a child then. The most popular question I've heard in my life is, Mr. Pamuk, are you Kemal, the main character of Museum of Innocence? I have, of course, some affinities, closeness to my character, and sometimes I say with tongue-in-cheek irony, by class, by age, by geography, by culture, we are similar. But he is more of a bourgeois. I am more of an intellectual. But we have something in common. We are kicked out of our bourgeois class. He, because he fell in love so dramatically, everyone made fun of him, and he was declassified by his bourgeois friends, a subject Proust may have liked. Me, I'm kicked out of my friends, perhaps voluntarily, and perhaps essentially because of politics and literature. Of course, all writers enjoy when you tell your own story to the reader and the reader thinks you invented it, or the other way around. When you invent a story and the reader thinks you lived it and that you didn't invent it, writers like this power a lot. This is the marriage certificate of my father and mother. They married in 1949 in Istanbul, and this photo was taken then. My uncle shot one of the first holders of 8mm hand cameras and shot us when we were kids. I'm lucky in that, so that I have films of myself and my brother in 1950s. These are all personal things from my family, from my photos, from the ephemera of the family history. Like my books, Museum of Innocence is trying to do many things simultaneously. There is a objective side to the museum that chronicles how the people of Istanbul lived, used these objects. It is a little modest museum of a city, while the other side is more inventive, both architecturally, organization is addressing our desires, sensibilities about time, space, remembering. Objects have power to give us back the times that were lost. Once you preserve an object, that is an object that you also focus your, reflect your memories in it. I wrote the novel looking at these objects, such as this thermometer was from actually our home. This necktie was my father's. There are portraits of my father. While I also found in flea markets this photo taken during the Second World War, which Turkey did not enter. Here you say the most powerful men, the soldiers in Turkey in 1940s who were drinking rakı. And since this alcohol was used in the novel and the museum so much, I exhibit here the glass they are drinking, attributing to the fact that a lot of men in Turkey drink rakı. All this box vitrine is a typical assemblage of daily life objects, personal things, but then I also care about the redness, pinkness, the color of the object. Not every object that my characters use in the end up in the compositions of vitrines in Museum of Innocence. The color matters, the details matters, the face matters, very personal touch also matters. But most importantly, all of my high school's friends' fathers had a bedside table like this with pills, tickets, and it made me a sort of a symbol of growing up being a father. Organizing a museum and organizing a story has some similarities. We actually, when we write a novel, we want to tell the things that we want to talk about most. The first time we fell in love, maybe we had a fight and someone punched our nose, then we fell from this cliff, and then we had a voyage. We want to talk about these things. A story is a vehicle, a line that connects these things that we want to talk about. This is the Russian formalist thinker Shklovsky's idea of a story. First, there are bright moments of being that we want to talk about. We want to write about this, okay? Then, how do I connect them? Find a story that will go over this. A museum is the same. We have these objects. I collected them. I don't know why I have them. Then I have to invent a story, put them in such a sequence that time will be shown through these objects. Or as in a novel, you put these episodes. First you fall in love, maybe that happens next, then you connect these empty spaces in between. In the novel, the main character, Füsun, gives a lot of effort to get a driver's license based on when I was 8 and my brother 10, my mother decided to have a driver's license, and she would take driver license, and me and my brother would sit at the back, and my mother would drive a car, and we would be tortured. But that stayed with me, and I, of course, like all creative persons, changed my mother's story to Füsun's story. This museum is a combination of very personal exhibiting as someone else's story, someone else's story exhibiting itself as if it was my own story. My mother did not approve me doing literature and art. She was, why now? You did novels. Okay, you're lucky. People are reading. Why do you do a museum now? You're wasting your money. No, who would come? She was partly true. But then I was in the United States teaching at New York, Columbia University. Then there was a one-day fire here. And then 8 o'clock in the morning, she was the first to come. So she is a good mother, happy about this, but always like typical Middle Eastern mothers, condescending or scolding, cared about it. There are also her images posing as Kemal's mother or someone else's mother. My late mother died 5 months ago at the age of 102. Her kitchen were like this museum. She never bought new things in the last 40 years and did her cooking all by herself for all her life. And her kitchen has all this old pottery. And suddenly when I go to my mother's, and this is already a museum, a lot of things. Don't forget that I began making this museum 20 years ago. And my relatives and friends were giving me things that were 20 years ago, 30 years old. So there are already objects that were out of homes of my friends and neighbors used 60 years ago. There is already a historical side to my museum, which was not intended at the beginning because it took so much time to do it. And I started thinking about and collecting about these things. This is one of my favorite boxes. Its composition is important for me. This one, where the crab is approaching our female heroine and threatening her, is also representative and symbolical, and the anxieties of a Turkish female young victim who wants to preserve her dignity, her being, her respectfulness, is one of the main energies in the story and in the museum. I've learned one thing from international reaction to this museum, that everyone, say my Italian, Spanish, French especially, visitors, they was, oh, we had the same radio at home, we had the same hat, we had the same salt shaker, we had the same object, which made me realize a subject that I explored and wrote about particularly, the migration of objects. Art historian Whitcover wrote a text and very dear essay about migration of symbols in art history. There's a symbol travels over cultures. I read this and it's an important idea for me, but I changed it slightly and I say, not only symbols travel, but popular objects, salt shakers, they copy each other, the same design. They do one in Czech Republic, one in Spain, one in Turkey, little they are produced. Just like flocks of birds migrating from cultures. This I learned. We had the same ticket. Oh, we had the same playing cards, the same telephone. This was a surprise for me because I was thinking I'm doing an Istanbul museum, which turned out to be a sort of a 1950s, 60s, 70s European daily life middle-class objects museum. This I learned. And the second thing is really that from both Turkish and international, the atmosphere of the museum counts. At the beginning, I didn't do it intentionally. If the museum visitor sees the other museum visitors who are looking at the objects, is the idea invented by Frank Lloyd Wright in Guggenheim Museum, where you not only look at the object, but you're also seeing other people looking at the object, which generates a sort of a triangular of desire. That if you see other people look at a particular object and you don't know what's at the background, you don't know the story, you don't know what's the context, but someone is looking, this is stronger than knowing the story. This attracts you to the objects because other people are busy. I am inviting to a new artificial space which will envelop you and will make you ask questions about being, time, remembering, attachment, love, jealousy, anger, and these objects are there to generate these things or make you ask these questions about your life, and also without understanding why you want to come back here. Here we are at the top floor of Museum of Innocence, in which regular narration through windows or boxes is left to side, where our main hero, Kemal, is living a sad life, had bought over the house that he visited for many years, and now is about to convert the house into a museum. He is living in the attic of the museum, this imaginary character, and real Orhan Pamuk is listening to this dying person's manic love story, as I'm supposed to sit here and listen to him. He tells me his story, and I write my novel, and he is doing the museum, and I'm chronicling his whole effort of his whole anger, fury of falling in love madly, and cannot possess the girl, but possess the objects, and composes this whole museum. I helped him a bit. I also wrote the catalog, which is also a novel.